Welcome to Make and Decorate, a podcast for makers who love to sew, quilt, and decorate. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Make and Decorate podcast. I am Stephanie, and this is episode 64 of season 3, originally published on February 18th, 2021. So, how are you doing in the month of February? February for me and us here in the Midwest has been, we're only halfway through the month or a little bit more, but snowmageddon. We have had snowstorm after snowstorm after snowstorm. And I'm recording this first segment on Tuesday the 16th. So it started snowing on the 15th and it ended sometime this morning. And we got 18 inches of snow in one day. For us, that's a lot. That is a blizzard, I'm telling you. I shoveled when I got home from work. Then my husband shoveled when he got home from work. And it was as if I'd never shoveled because there was the same amount of snow. And then when he got up early, super early in the morning, he shoveled again. And then when I was up, I was like, I cannot believe there's like another 5 inches of snow on the ground. It was just never ending shoveling. And it's crazy. It really is. I do love, though, that peaceful insulation and when it is snowing. But when you get so much, I mean, it was just coming down and down, and the snow piles couldn't keep up, and the roads were all messy and dangerous. So that part of it I don't really love. But now here we are the day after, and it always seems like the day after these like horrific storms comes this like beautiful, calm, serene day. And that's exactly what today is. The sun is out so beautifully. This is a beautiful day. The sky is blue. The sun is out. The snow looks beautiful. And so it's just, I've been posting in my Instagram stories like little videos of me and Cooper doing our walks in the snow and not of me shoveling, but just like showing the amounts of snow we got. And then even today, the fire truck was out front and they were going from fire hydrant to fire hydrant, digging the snow out from there. So the snow is really high. There's like mountains of snow outside and there's nowhere for it to go. I mean, we just, where do you shovel it now? There's like, the mountain of snow next to me is like as high, if not higher than myself. And of course we have a snowblower, but it has been in the repair shop for the last 2.5 weeks. And they are waiting for our carburetor part. It's just crazy. I guess when we get our snowblower back, guess what? It's not going to snow anymore. That's like Murphy's Law, right? Oh, it is crazy. And remember when I talked about last episode where people here, when they like dig out their parking space on the street, they will tend to put chairs there or whatever to save their spot because it is backbreaking work to shovel your car, like snow, dig your car out of the snow. So that's what people do around here. Well, on the news, they were showing how creative some people were getting with their space savers. And they had frozen 2 pairs of jeans. And I don't know how they did it, but they had to have stuffed it with something after they had gotten them wet, and then they probably just put them outside to freeze because it has been like sub-zero temperatures here as well. But they look so cool. They're just like these. It's like an invisible person wearing the jeans. So I thought that was clever, and it's a fun way to deal with something that you could kind of like be grumbling and complaining about with all the snow. But I like that. So I made a quilt. Yes, from start to finish. I started a quilt the Friday before and finished it this past Sunday. So 9 days. 9 days for me to start and completely finish quilted, bound, and labeled in 9 days is really good for me. It's fat. That's like a fast quilt for me. I know some people do it even faster, but yeah, and I love it. It's really, really nice. And, on Instagram, people have been posting pictures of quilts in the snow. Like there's this whole thing of like photographing your quilts while you're standing in the snow or the quilts on the snow. And I was like, I want a picture of my quilt in the snow. But, there's so much snow here. It's not like I could go stand in the snow because it's, like, up to my waist. So I was just trying to find a way where I could photograph it. So I got my photograph of the quilt, um, outside where it's out there with the snow. But I'll post it in the show notes on my podcast page. This quilt is a gift for someone who just had open heart surgery and it went well. And I don't know if this happens with you, but when things like this kind of come up and happen, um, it was just like a day or two after I found out, I just thought I need to make him a quilt. And it's kind of like that thing that's sort of like is that little voice in your head and it's telling you and you're just like that one the Kevin Costner movie Field of Dreams, if you make it, they will come. So it was kind of like that with me. And then I just started pulling fabrics and I searched for a pattern that was simple enough that I knew I could get done and got it done in 9 days, and it was fun. It got a little stressful uh, in some parts, but I just stepped away and told myself that you're not getting paid for this. No one asked you to make this quilt, so don't worry about it. And then when I went back the next morning to continue working on it, it was so much better. And of course, I think like when you're just so into it and I had been working on it for hours and hours and it just gets to you. And then you start getting really like irritated and things start going wrong. And then you start thinking like all the stuff is wrong with it, but it really isn't. So I'm glad I've learned to do that, but it still gets like I still find myself getting into that situation and getting like super stressed out and anxiety and everything. But at least once I recognized it, I was able to, talk myself off the ledge. So I'll tell you a little bit about this quilt. It's I don't think it's a new pattern at all. It's been out for a while. It's called Pixelated Quilt. That's the pattern name, Pixelated Quilt. And it is on the Robert Kaufman site under their patterns tab. And the designer of this quilt pattern is by Blue Elephant Stitches. So I'm going to put links to that um, site where you can download this pattern if you want to. It's all squares. It's all 5-inch squares. So, but it's kind of big for a throw quilt. It's like 75-inch square. Uh, and I used a charm pack for the heart, in addition to a couple of fat quarters of some mammoth flannel. And for the background, I used Essex linen. One of my favorite fabrics of all time is Essex linen. And the backing fabric is mammoth flannel in a gray and a red plaid. So this is everything that I've had in my stash. I had everything I needed. And, that charm pack I had, this is what's good about some of the online shops. And there's that one that that sends out a daily deal. And so I got that one red Wilmington 5 carat ruby or something like that. But it's like really cool deep reds of all different kind of like tone on tone patterns. So I just got that on a daily deal because I really liked the color and the way these looked. And here I am. I ended up using it. So sometimes kind of stocking up on things like that for future projects is a good thing to do. And it helps a lot when it's like 40% off. But I've been trying to, make more measured purchases when things like that come up. And I put a lot of thought into like, is this something that I can definitely pull from my stash in the future? Or is this just like some like, random thing that I'm not going to like the fabrics when I look at it, or, it's just that sort of thing. So I've been getting better and I've been using things that I've purchased not too long after. So I like how that's going. So when this podcast airs on the 18th is when QuiltCon Together starts. Well, they have the award ceremony, I think, the evening before, but the 18th is when all the workshops and some of the lectures are starting. And so I think I'm pretty prepared. There's this one thing I do have to prepare for it. For the hand quilting class, you have to have a sandwich, a quilt sandwich, ready for that. And I have a quilt top, and it's a small, it's like a mini quilt. It's probably like a 24-inch square, maybe a 30-inch square at the most, of a center star pattern. It's one of the first, it's actually the second quilt top I've ever made, uh, years ago, like back in 2010. And I have never quilted it. So I am pulling that out of the storage box and um, find a backing for it. And that will be used in my hand quilting class with Sarah Filkey. So I've got a couple of a borrow mending class and a borrow quilt class. So that's just the hard part about like the preparing for these workshops is that there these classes some of them call for a lot of supplies. Some of them sell kits, and so. Uh, yeah, it's a lot of work. And this is like kind of crept up on me. I can't believe that it's already here. So I think it's with all like the snowstorms and stuff that is just kind of taken up so much of our time that I haven't even had a chance to really like get super ready for it. But I'm going to have to because it's like in 2 days from the time I'm recording this. If you are also attending or participating in the virtual QuiltCon Together this week, let me know. You can add a comment to the Instagram post for this episode. You can post a comment on my podcast page where I put the show notes. So I'm just really interested to hear what the different workshops that people are taking. And I will definitely report back to you guys in the next episode on how all of those workshops went for me. All right, so I just have one recommendation of what I've been watching, because it's a long episode. So I just this one recommendation is that good that I do want to tell you about it. It is a movie, and I think it was released in 2018 or 2019. It follows the lives of a couple in California who purchase land and start a farm from scratch. And it follows their lives from 2010. This is when it started. And it's very endearing. It won, I think, a bunch of film awards too, but I hadn't heard of it until we just watched it this past weekend. It's so good. It is just good in every single way. And the cinematography is amazing. And from where they started to where they're at now is also like just so like interesting to watch. The land that they had was like completely desolate and barren and dead, very dead. Like there were no, bees, birds, animals, that sort of thing. And they hired this one consultant who really gave them the plan of what they have to do and how they had to create this I forgot, it's like a biodynamic like environment with the land that integrates all the wildlife, and the wildlife have this, the circle of life, but everyone like has a different contribution to nature. And to watch this transformation take place over a period of like 8 years was just truly just amazing. So I really highly recommend this documentary. It is The Biggest Little Farm. All right, so I'm really excited about our guest today, who is Pam Cobb from the Hip to Be a Square podcast. So we start the podcast off by talking about pets because we both have pets and they're very important in our lives. So if you are not interested in pets at all, you can feel free to fast forward to about the, 36, 37-minute mark. Somewhere around there. And then from that point on, it is all about quilting. All right. And then just one little update since the time we recorded this. We recorded this episode in early January, just to give you a time reference. But we talk about quilt guilds, and I talk about like my experience with my local Chicago Modern Quilt Guild and how then I switched back to individual. So I renewed my membership with the Chicago Modern Quilt Guild just about a week or so ago, and I'm really excited about it. I cannot wait to reconnect and socialize with quilters again. All right, so here is my conversation with Pam Cobb from the Hip to Be a Square podcast, and she was also on the Stitch TV show. It was the YouTube channel she did with Lynn. So I'm so excited to have Pam from Hip to Be a Square podcast. And I've been wanting Pam to come on my show for a while, and I finally asked her. Well, because she was so busy before, and I just felt like I shouldn't ask at that time. So, welcome, Pam. Hello. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm very flattered you asked. It's always like, oh, someone knows who I am. Oh gosh. Wow. Pressure. Don't mess it up.
Wow. Yes. I mean, I've listened to you for a long time, and before I started podcasting, and you're like in that group with Francis where you guys have been podcasting for a decade, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. October 15th-ish is about like my 10-year anniversary, and so I had released a podcast around then. For this year, for 2020.
I listened to that.
Yeah, like nothing sets. And I'm like, I think. And so I will just be honest with you. And I did drop a little nugget in the Facebook group for the twilters, as we called ourselves, like the tweeting quilters that is now on Facebook. And we didn't want to be the twilters, I guess. So we kept the name. But I decided to just officially shut down my podcast because I realized I don't have it in me to like commit to doing the regular stuff. I'm like, I think that season is over. I just want to make stuff.
But it happens. I mean, with a lot of people, they'll do it for a few years, and either they've moving on to something else that's taking their full attention, because podcasting is a lot of work.
It is.
It is so much work.
Yeah, and I was never one to be super into doing a lot of editing. I would just like plunk down with a microphone and record some chit chat about some podcasting. And there's going to be a cat yelling in the background, and I'm probably going to like have a coughing fit, and I might remember to mute. But I never went back and like edited out ums or, thoughtful pauses. I'm like, well, it's just part of how I talk. And so I never did a lot of like post editing other than to make sure like my music cues were kind of lined up and I wasn't talking crazy. But honestly, I didn't really study audio editing, so it's not like I had a ton of skills.
Yeah, I know. I learned it on the fly myself, and I do edit, but I don't edit my ums and stuff. But like when I'm recording solo, episodes or like my segment one part though, um, I I do have to edit out some stupid stuff that I'm like, oh, I'll say it, and then I go back and I'm like, why did I say that? And I'll just do a little clip and clip it out. But other than that, but it's still, that takes some time. And
Yeah, occasionally I realize I swore and I didn't mean to. I'm like, my mom didn't need to hear that. She knows I know that word, but she doesn't need to hear me say it. And I'm like, ooh.
see, and I don't know. It's good that I'm like so like kind of OCD about it because I'm so worried about like something going out there and people are just like what? And there was one time and you think you stopped the record button but you didn't, and there was something going on with something, and I'm like, what the F is going on here?
Yeah.
And I went back to edit and I'm like, oh no.
Ooh, this is
We gotta get that out of there. Oh my God. Thank God I edit. Oh man.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Well, it's with technology. I mean, technology does that to you. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I was really good about not swearing when my kids were younger, but now I'm like, they could totally teach me new words because they're in high school now. They know some things, but my daughter's so funny. She's the 14-year-old, and I will like drop an S-bomb in front of her and she'll still look at me like,
oh, because you're mom.
yeah. And I was like, it's fine. It's fine. I know that word. I know you know that word. I'm sure you've said that word. Like, it's fine. Just don't say it in front of your grandparents.
Right. Oh man. So, all right. I want to first start off with talking about pets because I don't want to forget to talk about it. And we'll get all like on the quilting train and never come back. So, and I know that pets are a big part of your life, and mine too. I'm like a dog fanatic. If I could have all the dogs in the world, I would. But I have Cooper right now. We used to have 3 pugs before Cooper. Yeah. So you have a dog, Fred, and then do you have 2 or 3 cats?
3 cats.
3 cats.
One never appears on camera, but is very active in the background, like doing parkour on things when I'm recording various things, either like work calls for my day job or, just, and it's weird. We got them all at the same time because before this kind of batch of pets, I had 2 cats that were siblings that I adopted right when I graduated college. So I was like 23. I'd had a bad breakup and I was like, well, I'm just going to get me some cats and commit to this cat lady life at age 23. It was a bad breakup.
Yeah.
And I planned to wait because like, maybe I'll travel. And then, I realize now, like, I don't like to travel. I didn't like it when I was in my 20s. Don't like it now. Ugh. All my cool stuff's at home. Why do I want to leave it? Mm. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to go get these cats and lean in. And I was volunteering at a cat shelter. Mm-hmm. Because that's a thing that I wanted to do to try and make friends. Guess what I made friends with? A bunch of middle-aged cat ladies. So that's how I was like, this found my people.
That's hilarious.
And they were weird cats. Like one of them had a soy allergy. I had to make her cat food because most of the cat food back then had soy in it. And so I had to like make cat food, which is weird. Like pork shoulder and canned pumpkin, all this stuff. Anyway, they both died within 2 weeks of each other. And so these cats that I had, like I met my husband, we had our kids, and then these cats both died within two different types of cancer. And this Fred had been hanging out at the airport. My husband's an aviation mechanic at a small county airport, not like the Atlanta airport. That would be crazy. But it's like the little 2- and 4-seater planes. And so someone had dumped this dog there, and he's like, this dog is super cool, and I think you should meet him. And I'm like, do I want a dog? I don't know. My cats are dying of cancer. And so the day that I had to put my second cat down, my husband brings the dog home, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? Bringing a dog home? And I just had to put my cat down.
That was serendipity, though.
I was a little angsty about the dog. I was just kind of looking at him like, I don't know about you, kid.
Oh.
But he was very sweet. He's about the size of the biggest cat. He's like a 20-pound dog.
Yeah, he looks so sweet. You have
He's
like, the pictures of him and stuff
he's a
and
very chill little dude.
mhm.
And everyone's like, what kind of dog is he? Like, he's brown. We don't know. He's a brown dog. I think he might be a quilt terrier because he loves to like burrow inside of quilts and blankets
Yeah.
and all the things. But he likes to fun police the cats. So Fred
Mhm.
came home on like a Wednesday night, and Saturday I was like, we're going to the cat shelter and adopting more cats. So I like went and took one of every color, because I'm a black
Mhm.
and white, a brown, and an orange cat,
Oh.
and they're all kind of close in age, and so they've all kind of become a family together with us. And now I'm
Mhm.
like, ooh, we're kind of outnumbered. It feels like, because when I'm home working now, and now I'm just surrounded by animals, like, oh no, what have I done to myself? But Fred is so funny about the cats because he would get riled up and try to fun police them. Like they'd have fun and he'd go and like bust up the fun and shoo them and chase them away from their toys. And we're like, stop. And he'd get yelled at a lot.
Oh.
And it's so funny now because everyone's kind of mellowed in, older middle age. And Fred will be asleep on the couch. And one of the cats will be like, oh, I want to sleep on that quilt or blanket or whatever too. And they'll like, just kind of sidle up and like fall asleep beside him or like just kind of lean on him or and he'll wake up and just the look on his face, he's so giddy, he's like, ee, it's a kitty, like he's so excited that the cats like him and that he's not being
Oh.
yelled at for touching him. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're okay, Fred.
Yeah.
He's a little chill dude, but he just had dental surgery, he had a tooth taken out,
Oh.
his cone of shame, he had soft food, I had to make dog treats because he couldn't have hard food.
Oh my goodness.
What is this
Yeah.
crazy life?
I remember all the teeth thing with my pugs because they've got that,
Yeah.
it's brachio whatever, but it's with smushed in nose.
Mm-hmm.
And those types of dogs, like Boston Terriers too, will have bad teeth because it's all smushed in and their teeth are like, they don't get air or
All
oxygen.
crowded. And,
Yeah, they're all crowded and back there. And so, yeah, that was like unexpected expenses.
Yeah.
And they have to
Oh, yeah.
anesthetize them every time. So, whoo, oh my gosh. So now with Cooper, like from day one, I'm like, toothbrush,
Brush his teeth.
toothpaste.
Yep.
But he's got the long snout and it's different. Like when he smiles, all his
Yeah.
teeth are like, they're getting
They're
air.
out there.
And, yeah.
Yeah. You can kind of look in there too and see him like,
Mhm.
is everything looking okay? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Fred has a
So,
heart murmur too. So there was like extra angst. He has like his
oh,
daily heart medicine pills. Like, I got to get my pills. And he got real like food anxious in this recovery period from the dental surgery because we had to like put his normal heart medicine in there, but like mash it up.
uh-huh.
You can't just like drop the pill in because they don't want crunchy stuff in his soft food. So
Oh,
we'd like mash up his regular pills and then put in like the antibiotic that he had to go on because he got an infection.
uh-huh.
And also like the pain meds they wanted to keep him on to mellow him out. I'm
Wow.
like, he's already pretty chill.
Yeah.
He's going to be unconscious if you mellow him out too much.
Right.
So it would take so long to prep dinner and he would just start like whining and barking. And he's not a vocal dog. So it was
Mhm.
like, simmer down, kid. Like, we're getting it. So thank goodness we're past all that now.
Oh, that's good.
And yeah. And he's just hanging out downstairs with my husband right now in the blanket someone bought me that looks like a tortilla. So he's a little burrito.
So this was just done. So you had to do this like during this pandemic going on, and things are like today I took Cooper for his annual. He had to get all his booster shots, and he had an ear infection. So so it was very different. We had
Yeah.
to call ahead, and then they would call back when there was like, an opening, and then drive there. Then you got to sit in the parking lot in your car, call them again, I'm here. And then they're like, okay, there's like, one or two people in front of you. We'll call you. And
Yeah,
then
same with us.
what they didn't tell me was, because I thought, oh, okay, they're going to let us go in one at a time.
No, they're
That's
not.
Great. That's fine. No,
Nope.
I'm walking in there with Cooper, and she's like, okay, well, I'll take him from here. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't go in? She said, no. I was like,
They don't want your cooties in there. Yeah.
oh
The same
my
with us where,
gosh.
we've never had a problem getting an appointment because we just have some really good vet that's near us that actually has volunteered for the cat shelter that I volunteer at. So that's like, ooh, quality vet. They donate
Mhm.
time. Um, and yeah, it was like when you pull in, you have to call, and then they're like, all right, someone will come out and get it. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, well, Fred's kind of short. So I'm like, well, he's not very good at jumping out of my car because I have an SUV
Uh,
and it's a little high up. And so I'm like, you got to lift him down. And so they're treating him like a purse dog. They're just like tucking him under their arm and carrying him inside. Man,
oh.
he was not a fan because he kind of figured out like, oh, I'm here to get poked at. Ugh.
Cooper knows.
Yeah.
He'll know when we're halfway there where we're going, and then he'll start his little shaking routine in the car. And
Yeah.
but today
Poor buddy.
he has not been there for a year, for since his last checkup. So he didn't do his usual like, oh, we're halfway there. He was all like, oh, we're going
Yeah, we're just going for a ride
somewhere.
in a pandemic.
Soon as I
Cool.
pulled into the parking lot, it all came back to he knew when we were in the
Oh,
parking lot. But anyway, you have to have a lot of trust in a vet to relinquish your dog to like, trust them that are they going to give him the shot? Of course they are, but I mean, you know what I mean?
I will
It's just
say,
like
like, I felt that because I have two human kids in addition to the four-legged ones, and they were both born by C-section, and I had my tubes tied after my daughter, and the the OBGYN that was on call when I went into labor and that did the C-section was not the OBGYN that I had been seeing for my pregnancy. It was like this one dude that I saw the one time because they made you see everybody in the practice.
oh,
And he made a joke about me being barefoot and pregnant when I'm like up in the stirrups at 8 months. And I was
what?
like, I hate this dude. He's the dude that delivered my daughter.
Of course he is.
And so I know I was supposed to get my tubes tied. And so like for 15 years, I'm like, did he actually do it? Or have I just lucked out? Like, I don't know. Because this
Right.
dude was so jokey. It was like,
Yeah.
I trust that you actually did the medical procedure that you were supposed to do, but I
Right.
don't know.
I know you don't. I mean, you have to relinquish a lot of trust for,
Yeah.
doctors and just like with um uh like the teeth extraction. Did they really pull the teeth and did he really need that many teeth? You don't know.
Yeah. And
You're
his breath
just
was real
trusting.
funky, so we needed some done.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, I was just like, oh, thank goodness I really trust him
Yeah.
because I texted my husband and I was like, you know how that little emoji with the angry face, orange. I'm like, they didn't
Oh,
let me
yeah.
go in. It's a good thing I trust him because our previous vet with the pugs, I said I would never relinquish them after,
Yeah.
our experience with them because they were total ripoffs. And
It's the worst.
we caught on to it, after a few years, and then we switched. But man, I'm telling you, you have to
Yeah.
like look out because it's
Yeah.
just
Like,
they.
why do I have
Well,
to practically
they know
understand?
that people will do anything for their pets, so they take advantage. And then stuff was just like astronomically priced. It's
Yeah.
just crazy. But anyway, I just wanted to hear about your pets, and because I just it's a big part of me and my life, and I'm a dog person. My husband's allergic to cats, and I don't mind cats, but I did have this experience with my roommate when I when I was living
Look,
with a roommate
I'm not gonna lie.
and
Some
her two
cats are
cats.
jerks.
Her one cat was neurotic, and he had it in for me.
Ugh.
So
Yeah, some cats are
he
real
kept peeing
jerks.
on my bed,
Oh, yeah.
and then she let him go. She didn't cook or anything, so she would let him go all over the kitchen counters, across the cooktop, and then he would always pee in the kitchen sink. And I was just like,
Oh,
what is
gross. That's
going
real
on
gross.
here? What's going on here? I'm like with the gloves on and the Clorox, and I'm like,
Ugh.
your cat.
Cat pee has some funk to it as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah. It's terrible. So for a while there afterwards, I was like,
No,
oh,
thank you. No,
don't
but
even
totally fine.
mention the word cat to me.
You know,
But
look, more cats for me. All right, so it's fine.
but my sister had a cat for a long time. This cat was like 22 years old, like when she
Yeah,
passed her, and she was totally different. She was the most perfect cat you could ever have. I mean, just
yeah.
yeah.
A lot of it
So,
depends on kind of how they're socialized when they're kittens,
hmm
and so I still am in touch with the foster parents that had all three of mine, because two of them were in a foster home together and the other one was with a different woman.
Hmm.
And so I still send them like pictures or tag them in Facebook and stuff. And I can tell like, ooh, when the time comes, when mine pass and I want to adopt more, I'm going back to them to be like, I need some more of your quality kittens, please.
Oh,
Because they're well socialized. They're,
yeah.
Used to other animals. They're good with
Hmm.
people,
That's
they
really
don't mind
important.
being around people, as opposed, my parents had a cat that like just lived under the bed.
Yeah, yeah.
We called
Hmm.
him the dust mop, bless his heart.
Oh,
I don't know. My mom knows that I called him the dust mop. I
the
did, Mom.
dust
I'm
mop.
sorry. But Cecil was a
Oh,
dust mop. He liked you, but we never saw him when we'd go to visit because he was like, ooh, strangers. And he would just stay under the bed.
oh,
Like,
yeah.
did he eat? We were there for 3 days. What happened?
You waited till you guys went to bed, and then
Yeah.
he hung out in the kitchen. So let's move on to your quilting life, and it's pretty extensive, and I love hearing about it. So I took like a intro class at a local quilt shop back in like 2010, but it was just about a quilt top,
Mhm.
and I had no idea what to do. I'm
You're
like,
like, how do I make it a blanket?
you left me
Please.
hanging.
This will not keep me warm.
I know. Yeah, and then finally I took a free motion quilting class as my first quilting class,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't the right instructor. So it was terrified me for a couple years. So I finally made my first full quilt in 2013. So for me, that's really not that long ago. But you've been quilting for a while, right?
Yeah, I've actually been sewing since I was 5. My grandmother sewed, my mother both sewed, and they did a lot of like homemade clothes.
Hmm.
And my formative years were the 80s.
Me too. I think
So
we're
I
in
made
the
a lot of
same
very fashionable peg-legged
Gen
paisley
X.
print pants,
Yes.
because that is the fabric that you could buy at the Sofro.
So we had Minnesota fabrics.
Oh, nice. We had a Joann's and the Sofro, and the Sofro was in the
So fro.
mall,
Okay.
because that's how she sewing was back in the 80s, the mall. Uh, and I did like my own prom dress, which looked like a wedding dress. That was not a cute look. I'm sure my date was a little unnerved. Um, and then I had done I sewed various formal dresses for myself through college. I was in a sorority. And then I made my wedding dress, like a big full on poofy satin
You
number.
did.
Yeah. And I got
Wow.
married in the year 2000, right after Y2K, because I guess I was an optimist. Like, I'm sure this will be fine. So our anniversary is coming up in a couple weeks.
Wow, cool.
And I don't know why. No, I'm normally like an anxious planner. I don't know why I was like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine to get married in January of 2000. What's going to go wrong? I mean, actually nothing.
Yeah,
But I
nothing happened
spent
in 2000.
like all of fall 1999. I'm like planning the wedding. I just started grad school. I was still working full time. I'm sewing a wedding dress. And I was the fundraising chair for the cat shelter. And we had our big
Wow.
auction in the fall. I spent a lot of time crying in the fall of 1999.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
after I've made my wedding dress, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to top that, like as a piece of clothing. And so I better find something else to sew. So I had done pillows and stuff. And my new
Hmm.
mother-in-law was a quilter. And I was like, all right, let me pick up this quilting thing. So we got something to talk about, because I'm not going to give her more grandkids for a while, because I just started grad school. And some of my first quilts, I didn't go to local quilt shops. I didn't join a guild. I was like, I've been sewing for a while. I'm going to just figure this out. And so I bought a lot of like cheater panels.
Hmm.
And I had the singer that my grandmother gave me when I graduated high school that I had made my wedding dress on. And I had a walking foot. I didn't know what it was for. I just used a regular, the default
Mm.
3/8 inch foot. And I would like buy the polyester batting, and I knew to like, oh, you got to layer it. You got to have your top and your batting and your back. I don't know how I basted. It was not very good, however it was. And I would just use this regular walking foot, and I stitched. It was like this printed panel of kittens or something. I was like, I'll make a quilt and donate it to the shelter to auction off. It maybe got like $7. It's not a good quilt, because I just like with very bad basting, use this machine to like stitch the outline of this cat playing with a ball of yarn. And I
Mm-hmm.
just remember doing it thinking, there's so many turns in this. Like, this is really hard because I didn't know free motion. I didn't know that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real bad quilt. I'm sure someone let their cat throw up on it, which is fine because it needed to be thrown up on. But I slowly got better.
Mm-hmm.
And I found I took a lot more risks when I was a newer quilter because I didn't know what I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And so when I finally got connected with the group, I was like, well, I've always kind of enjoyed doing volunteer work. So let me find like a quilting group that does volunteer stuff. And so I had found a friend. I had a mommy blog back then. And so I had someone that was a reader that kind of lived a couple towns over. It was like, oh, well, at my church, they've got this group and maybe you want to join them because they would do quilts for like the elderly people in the congregation, or they would, make quilts for the seniors that were graduating high school, or they would just, donate to the children's hospital. I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. Because then I get to practice. I'm still making something that's going to a good home. I'm not just, the thing that I hate most is like practice pieces. I'm like, no, I don't want to just like waste fabric. I want to like do the thing, which leads me to occasionally some jacked up areas on a quilt as I try something new.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got connected with this group, and it was just kind of in talking to those women and learning. And there were some women that had been quilting for like 40, 50 years. And then there were some closer to my age that were just kind of starting out. And I remember when I started my podcast, I named it Hip to be a Square because I was like, I'm only doing squares. And look how many cool things I can do with just squares, y'all, because I'm not trying these triangles. That looks hard.
Let alone curves. But you would be good at curves because you sewed clothing before.
Yeah. Well, I've since
I
branched
sewed
out from the
clothing
squares.
before too. I sewed a long time before I started quilting. So curves were never like the bane of my
it
quilting
didn't freak me out.
existence. Right.
Like,
right.
all right, it's a curve.
Yeah.
Guess what? I meant a seam to be straight. Turned out curved. It's okay. I think I had probably been quilting like 3 or 4 years before I took a class because I kind of got to the point where that group in the church I'd been sewing with, like, just got really focused on sewing for the congregation. And I didn't go to the church. And I was like, I don't know who these people are we're sewing stuff for.
Yeah.
Maybe I should find a different group.
Uh-huh.
And so the modern quilt guilds had started popping up, but I found the Atlanta chapter, and they had just started like a few months before. And I was like, oh, this sounds like women that are closer to my age. I don't know that I consider myself a modern quilter, but I like bright colors. I like to work with that. I wasn't really drawn to like the calicos and the reproduction prints.
Mm-hmm.
And the first event that I saw that they were doing, so I'm in the Atlanta area.
Mm-hmm.
And the geography is such that we've got this interstate called 285 that really just kind of surrounds the city.
Mm-hmm.
And you're either inside the perimeter person, like you live kind of in downtown or one of those areas, or you're an outside the perimeter person, you're in a suburb. And I am an OTP, or outside the perimeter. And all their meetings were ITP. And it was like,
yes.
I'm not driving
Uh-huh.
ITP for this crazy thing because Atlanta traffic's horrible.
I'm in
And so-
Chicago, so we're the same. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't even.
That's funny because we're the same way. Yours is 284, you said? Or
285.
285?
Yeah.
Ours is 294 that goes around Chicago.
Well, there you go.
And it's the suburbs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like stalking their, I don't know if it's a Facebook page or their webpage. And like, I got to find out if they're going to do anything outside the perimeter on like the north side of town where I was. And they had like a sew-in set up at someone's house. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just show up for that. And me being me, I hate being late. I am scarily either on time or early.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm anxious enough that I won't get there early and then just sit in my car because I think, oh, they're going to think I'm a weirdo just sitting in my car outside their house. And so I showed up like 5 minutes early to this woman that I had never met before. And I'm like, got my Singer sewing machine and a pile of like Robin Pandolph fabrics because that's what I had cut, which were not modern fabrics. They're like shabby chic. And I'm like, hi, I'm here to sew. She's like, okay. And so I like set up my table and I just like started sewing, and then other people trickled in and they're like, who's the new girl? I was real awkward. I'm still really good friends with that woman to this day.
Oh, that's good.
She's like, yeah, ever since you showed up to my house, we just felt a bond. I'm like, well, there you go. I'm glad you let me
that's
in.
good. Yeah, I know.
I was going to plunder my way in there anyway. And
Oh, that's
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
You're well, I showed up to some sewing groups without knowing anybody before, but yeah, I don't know. I would be the one waiting in the car until someone else showed up.
There are points in my life that I look back and I'm like, you were very brave and you didn't know it. Like when I
Yes.
moved 500 miles from home to go to college, and I was so shy and so withdrawn as a kid, and like just scared of everything, scared to talk to people, scared to tell people how I felt about anything.
Mm.
Like the one time I told my mom I thought a shirt looked good. I had never said anything like that before. She bought me that shirt. Turns out that shirt was the ugliest shirt I'd ever seen. I just saw it from a distance. Up close, hideous.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
the 80s, so you know stuff got real bad.
Oh yeah.
and I kept so much stuff in it. And then I'm like, and yet I just was like, well, I'm going to move to Georgia to go to college. So goodbye. And my parents were like, what happened? and stuff like that. And then like just showing up to Ray's house to be like, well, I'm here to sew and you can deal with it. It was like, wow, weird. How I'm just going to completely ignore the parts of my personality that are riddled with anxiety and just plunder through this.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I think you say that you're sort of an introvert, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely am too. But I've done stuff like that. Like you said, well, my excuse though and reason for going halfway across the country to university was I'm oldest of 6 kids and I just needed to like
You had to get out.
get out. I was like, bye-bye.
Smell you later.
Homesick? No.
I mean, I could tell it manifested because we went to the old spaghetti factory, which is like this downtown Atlanta restaurant, because I went to Georgia Tech, which is smack in the middle of downtown. Mm-hmm. And so my parents took me to the old spaghetti factory the night before they were going to leave. And I remember I was such a jerk about it. I was mad at them for leaving me at a college that I had chosen to go to. And so I was so mean to them at this time. I was like angry about the pasta choices. Like, this cheese is weird. I can't believe you brought me here. Like, ridiculous. Like, full 18-year-old drama.
Yeah, you were having a hard time processing.
I was like, oh no, they're going to leave me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be stuck with 2 women named Jennifer that I don't know. They were all Jennifer back then, roommates. I'm like, what have I done? How will I even know how to get to class? Like, because this was before Google. So I'm like,
I know.
What building is this? Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, those were the days of like pull out the paper map from your glove box.
Yeah.
To find anything.
I think my dad may have laminated the campus map for me. Drawing on dry erase markers, plotting out like if I have to leave by 7:14 to get there on time. Like,
oh, that was nice of him.
Yeah. You spend your life thinking you're turning into your mom, and then you realize, oh, I'm turning into my dad.
It's inevitable.
We have a lot more in common than I thought. Yeah.
Oh man. So, okay. So that's kind of started your kind of intro into like modern quilting.
With being adjacent to
group.
modern groups, yeah. I don't know that I necessarily have a style because I'm
the same way. Well, I don't know. I think about this, and I joined the Chicago Modern Quilt Guild very when I first was like I didn't even know what I was doing quilting wise, and they were just starting too. So then I got a little just bit too like just shy and discouraged about it. So then I didn't rejoin again. And then years later, I joined the individual, and I'm still with like the individual now because they meet on Sundays, and it's just a hard day for me to like just break up the whole day and go for 3 hours.
Yeah, it could be a journey. And then it's like, oh, we got to do lunch. I don't want to do lunch. I want to go back and sew. Yeah.
But I love the vibe and the energy that they have. But again, like I'm not like like gung ho like 90% negative space and one little
Yeah, the
thing
minimalist
here.
style, and like
Minimalist.
I
Right.
appreciate it, but I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
that's not me.
I do. I mean, I think some things are really cool, but when you're trying to find what your own style is, it's like
Hmm.
you try whatever here and there, and I finally am like, I'm not traditional, I'm not modern, and I come well. My trade background is interior design, so what we call mixing traditional with contemporary is transitional. So that's how
Hmm.
I call my quilting style. I'm transitional because I
See,
pull a little from each, you
yeah,
know.
I think I've called myself a modern traditionalist because I like the precision of piecing and having points that match and like the accuracy. Like
Mm-hmm.
now I don't always do it,
Mm-hmm.
but I like it when I do it. I
Sure.
feel better about it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, I just want to make a blanket that's going to keep someone warm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm drawn to more of the brighter colors and sometimes more the simpler palettes. And I think part of that, for me at least, is I have not, I don't know that I've had a lot of success when I'm trying to mix prints. And so when gravitating to fabric choices, it's a lot more tonals or solids. And I end up just like, oh, I'm putting together a Garanimals quilt because these all have giraffe tags, so they're going to go together. And so I've tried to get better about like, ooh, let me be bold and have two prints in this quilt.
Yeah.
And then there are times where I'm like, to heck with it. I'm just like pulling out my scrap stash and let me just sew some 5-inch squares together that all kind of fit this color family and see what happens. So I still experiment. And then I think, well, this will keep someone warm in the dark and it won't matter. They can always just turn it over and look at the back.
Well, when you do that, do you end up liking the mixture of your scraps as how
It
you?
depends. If I approach it from, there's a fabric that I like that has many colors in it. And I just did this with a top that I made actually just about a week ago. I like picked a fat quarter that I had in my stash, and it was like a teal background, and it was a paisley print that had like yellows and reds and oranges and a little bit of green in it. And I had seen this pattern in a magazine, and it's been a long time since I like saw a pattern in a magazine. And I'm like, oh, I want to make that because I spent 5 years writing patterns and I was a little burned out. And I'm like, I just want to follow someone else's directions and not think about it. So
Right.
let me go make this thing that I saw in the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with the fat quarter. And so that helped me guide my color palette. And so when I started pulling in like other fat quarters and scraps to work with it, I'm like, all right, if I stick with the teal, the yellow, the orange, the green, like it should work because some other designer got paid to put these colors together. They must know what they're doing. And then I get to experiment with like, all right, well, here's a print that has 3 of those colors. I think it'll still work. And so I start to like branch out that way. So when I can work from a palette and I'm still relying on a fabric that's printed that way to define that palette, I think the next step for me is like, all right, well, let me look at a photo, kind of like photo seeds or one of those things that you find on Pinterest. You're like, oh, it's a beautiful photo.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the 5 primary colors in it. If I
Mm-hmm.
can start doing that, I think that is kind of my next step in growth in making colors work better together. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it just looks like clown vomit when I do it. And I'm like, oh no, this went very badly.
Well, I think it is as long as you have the values
Mm-hmm.
balanced, the lights, the mediums, and the darks. I don't
Yeah.
think you can go that wrong unless you're really putting like, you know, weird colors together.
Yeah. I've done some weird. In the magazine pattern that I did, I just picked white for the background. And I know that's a very safe and expected thing, but I'm like, but I know it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had thought like, oh, I could get a color. And then I went looking at my stash. I didn't have enough of any one solid color to like use as the background. I'm like, but I have enough white. And so I'm okay being in my comfort zone because it's been a really hard year, 2020. And so I don't think anyone's going to be mad that I used white for a quilt background.
No. Well, and I mean, I know stuff can get bad raps like that. It's like people move on and like it's all about the charcoal backgrounds and, but the white still like color and pattern
Yeah,
contrasts off of
still
it.
pops.
It looks nice.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would have used black. I didn't have enough of that. Oh well.
So then, talk about like what do you like to do most? Do you like piecing? Do you like foundation paper piece? Is there a type of piecing that you like and you favor most, or it's just whatever you feel like
Yeah.
doing
I
at the
think everything's a
moment?
good idea when I start doing it. And I've done a lot of different techniques. Like I finally
Hmm.
learned how to hand applique circles that didn't have corners.
Oh,
And, yeah. Thank you, Karen K. Buckley. Took her class. It was great. Bought the templates, bought this, like have all my money because I could finally make a circle that doesn't have corners. Thank
okay.
goodness. Yeah. Um, Now I've like hand appliqued one quilt and it's, like yay big. You can't see my hands on the podcast. It's like 20 inches square.
Okay.
And only the center has the applique on it.
Uh-huh.
But I'm glad that I know that technique because now I can reverse applique a circle. I could hand applique. I could do, there's a Sharon Schomburg technique that uses a special kind of interfacing. I could do a fusible. So like I could do all those different things. I think where I feel most satisfied with the creative vision, I enjoy the piecing. I think that's my favorite part because that is where I tend to get into like the flow state of like, I'm in the zone, I'm making a thing. There is clearly progress happening because
Yeah.
my brain just likes to check boxes. Like, ooh, we're done with that part. We did another 20. We did another 20. We're done with this section. Now we can make blocks. And so that's what really engages the pleasure center of my brain when it comes to quilting. But I'm rarely purely satisfied with simply piecing. I like to add a dabble of applique or something fun or unexpected. Sometimes I'll just do something crazy on the back. Sometimes I will applique something on the front of the quilt just to elevate it a little bit.
I love applique. I really do. I like to layer it in too.
Yeah.
And even just that elemental, you don't have to do the whole thing stitched or whatever, even hand quilted,
Yeah.
but just adding a little bit of it adds such a like dimension to the whole thing and elevates it to like, wow, I did that.
Yeah.
And it looks
And
pretty good.
And because I do so much, like when I've got leftover fabric, I just cut it up into different scrap sizes. So I have like 3.5 inch squares, 5 inch squares, like, and 2 inch squares are like my default sizes. And so when I go to start a new project, I have a lot of patterns that will use these different sizes. Or sometimes I will just say like, all right, well, let me just piece together a whole bunch of green squares into different blocks. And then I end up with like an all green background. Well, that's kind of boring. And so then you need something like applique. And I had been
Yeah.
cleaning out my closet over the 2 weeks that I had off around Christmas. And I found some old notebooks from like when I was first quilting. And I had a lot of designs where I'd just written like, green background. And then I had sketched like, I'll put a carousel horse on it. I'll put a penguin. I'll add an elephant, like just different designs to add a little something to it that were applique. And so I like bringing those two things together, and I love a Baltimore album quilt. I don't know that I'll ever make one.
I know.
'Cause that's a lot of work.
Yeah. I love it too. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. So I think I like mixing that stuff together.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at quilting. I've taught free motion quilting. I have a sit down handy quilter Sweet 16.
How nice.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Oh, so
My cats love it too. They like to just like sit on it and like go for little surf rides as I'm trying to quilt. But I find I will let quilt tops pile up because I'm so excited about the piecing or making the top that I'm like, oh, I don't feel like quilting. And then I have to like go on a tear and like quilt 3 quilts all in a row, which is kind of where I'm at right now. I have like 3 basted quilts and I'm like, ooh, I got to quilt some of these this weekend. They're piling up.
But then when you start the quilting of it, are you like, what? Why was I holding off on these? It's like, it's not that bad. I'm having fun quilting
Yeah,
these.
I find myself more adventurous with quilting patterns on smaller quilts because I think about half of the quilts that I make are still getting donated to DFACs through our guild. They work with, they donate the kids that are just going into foster care.
Okay.
They may be even taken from a home and they don't really have anything. And so they let the kids go and like pick out a quilt that's their quilt and stays with them, for as long as they, still have it. And so because so much of the quilting that I'm doing is for that purpose, like they don't care about the stitches. They don't care that I use a loop-to-loop instead of a stipple or whatever. And And depending on where my brain is at, if I'm like, yeah, I really want to get back to piecing, like I will just do an all over meander and like knock it out in 45 minutes.
Mm.
But I find when I'm doing like wall hangings or smaller pieces, that's when I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, let me bust out some rulers and do some ruler work
Mm.
and then do some micro stippling and do like
Mhm.
a Harlequin pattern. And then I just go a little bananas on the smaller stuff.
Okay. Yeah, and then it seems like you don't have that attachment to things that you make because you donate and give away a lot, which is really good. Because I know sometimes it's hard to
Yeah.
put all that time and effort into something and then you're relinquishing it.
Yeah. Well, honestly, when I first started quilting with that church group, everything I made was being donated and it
Yeah.
was just a habit then. And
Uh-huh.
I think I still have the first quilt that I made for myself, but I didn't make it until I'd been quilting for like 4 years. I didn't
Hmm.
keep anything because I was either making it to donate to the shelter to auction off or I was donating it to the church group. And
Hmm.
then we finally did like this mystery quilt as the group. And I was like, oh, I think I'm keeping this one. And
Yeah.
it was so intense. I'm like, what if I mess up the colors? I'm stuck with this quilt forever. And then I'm going to hate it. And my husband still uses it on the bed. And I'm like, all right, simmer down.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
and it's gotten to the
You're
point
your
now, I'm
own
like,
worst customer.
I've made so many quilts. There are 5 quilts in the basket beside me right now.
Oh,
And these
wow.
are guest quilts. There is a quilt I made from a Block of the Month program in 2012. And I just love the fabrics. Never actually used it. It just sits here rolled up in this basket. Just no one's ever used it. So I have plenty of quilts at my
See, but
house.
I don't. We have
Oh,
one that I made for my husband out of his vintage rock t-shirts. It's
oh,
pretty
fun.
cool. Yeah. I did like the black background, but I made this applique uh out of, his shirts with
Hmm.
he loves that Elvis TLC with the lightning bolt. So that's what I did, TLC and the lightning bolt. Okay, future me here. It is not TLC, it is TCB, which means taking care of business. So I don't know what I was thinking of TLC because that's a whole different group. But it's all like patched worked, parts of his
Yeah.
t-shirts.
Yeah.
And then the background are all the squares of, the centers of the whatever, the,
Yeah.
the Nirvanas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's the only quilt because I'm always making them for other people. So
I know.
I every year I'm like, I need a quilt for me, for this house, for
Yeah,
us.
I got in the habit of doing Bonnie Hunter's annual mysteries for like
Mm-hmm.
5 years in a row. And those are huge quilts. They're all like at least full size,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes queen size. And I made those for like 5 years in a row. And now I have like all these giant, like scrappy, very colorful quilts. So I'm like, that is the bulk of my living room. And then I would get to where like, oh, here's a new Kate Spain line of fabric. I love her designs. I just love the bright colors. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make something for that. And then all of a sudden now there's like 20 quilts in my living room. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh, you're
I'm going to
prolific.
I'm gonna need to reel
Yeah.
this in. Yeah, like I had to build furniture just to hold them. I was like, we're gonna need to get rid of these Legos, kids, because Mama's got to store some more quilts in this cabinet.
Yes, got to support your habit.
Yeah, it's to the point where I'm like, I can't make another quilt for myself, like because we have so many. And it's so funny because I'll like make stuff and think like, oh, I'm just gonna donate this, and my mom will see it. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
post it on Instagram, she's like, do you have a home for that quilt? I'm like, do you want it? And she has like 15 quilts now. And yet I'm still making her one for
That's
her
funny.
birthday because I found fabric that I know she'll like. So I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
here's the 16th quilt, Mom. Here you go. Oh, spoiler alert, Mom, you're getting a quilt for your birthday. It's in a couple
Spoiler
weeks.
alert. That's fun though.
Yeah. I enjoy making them and I'm going to keep making them. So I might
Mhm.
as well get used to giving them away or else I'm just going to have this entire room full of quilts
Right,
that are going to
right.
do no one any good. I
Become a
would rather them
quilt
be out there.
hoarder.
Yeah, I would rather them be out in the world being loved and used and,
Uh-huh.
peed on and thrown up on and drug around and
Hmm.
loved and disintegrate because they made someone happy than me
Yeah,
hoarding them,
yeah.
in this basket just because I like it.
And I honestly have never met a single person who would not love to get a quilt. I mean, teenager, kid, guys, you name it. everyone loves a quilt.
Yeah.
They
No,
do.
sometimes they go to call it a blanket and like the fabric
Of
on the back more
course.
than the front. And
Oh,
then they
yeah.
only get the one quilt. And you're like, and you're done. Thank you. Enjoy it. You're never getting another one from me.
Oh my gosh.
I had to learn like how to wrap quilts to give to people because I used to wrap them so that the front of the quilt was folded to the inside. And when you opened it, the first thing you'd see would be the label.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
then I learned, oh no, then they think that's the front. And
Right.
they're so excited about the single fabric you put on the back. And you're like, would you please turn it over and look at all the hard work? And so I finally figured out like how to fold them so the front of the quilt is out, but I like fold the label corner back.
Back. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they like, there is a front and a
Mm-hmm.
back. Please like have the front. Yeah.
That's
I
funny.
did a one block wonder for a friend. I made it, and then she commented on Instagram that she liked it. I'm like, oh, please have it because I don't know what else I'm going to do with it. But because it's a one block wonder, I had like the single panel on the back, a
Mm-hmm.
hole, so you can kind of see what it was. And we worked together, and so I see it. She keeps it on the back of her couch in the
Mm-hmm.
background of all our video calls, and she keeps it with the back or facing out. And I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Turn it around. I'm so glad you love it. Turn it around.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. I think as people that aren't, like part of this whole quilting world, they think that a blanket is a solid piece of fabric. They're not used to seeing like cut up beautiful mosaic designs or,
Yeah.
geometric
Yeah, well, they're
whatever.
used to like a Walmart quilt where maybe it's
Right.
printed to look like it's pieced, but it's
Right.
not.
Yeah. Yeah,
We have a
definitely.
cat visitor joining us, by
Yeah,
the
I
way.
see that.
This is Jet.
Jet. Jet black.
Yes, his mother's name was Maria. So when you're a jet all the way. He's not a shark. Don't get it twisted.
Not a shark.
Go bug your father. What are you doing?
So, so what about let's talk about binding. Do you have a certain like sometimes do you like binding or is it like the bane of your quilting
I like being
world?
done with binding.
Yeah.
And like 90% of the quilts that I make, unless they're going to be hung in a show, get machine bound all the way.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I cut my binding because I've been doing it long enough. I have like the math and the science down where I cut my binding to 2 1/8 inches.
Ooh.
And
I have never heard that.
well, because 2 1/4 made it a little too chunky on the front.
Huh.
So, because I stitch it down on the back of the quilt
Uh-huh.
and then I flip it to the front and I stitch it down on the front and my cat is grabbing the earbuds.
Yeah.
Cool. Because I know there are people that stitch it onto the front of the quilt, flip it to the back and stitch it down from the front. I just have this paranoia that I'm like totally going to miss catching
No,
the
I
back
haven't
of it.
heard that yet.
Oh yeah.
That's a different method.
And then you can go real crazy and like glue it down with Elmer's glue because that washes out. Not the glue all, but
Yeah,
like the school
I've
glue.
seen people do that.
And I've done that, but it's just not my favorite.
Yeah.
So I don't do a lot of quilts that have defined points on the outside edge because usually I will cover them up with binding because I'm like, it's not an exact science sometimes. So I stitch mine on the back, bring it to the front and machine stitch it down because what I found even when I hand stitch bindings on quilts, like living room quilts, they get washed a ton because there's pets and stuff on them and, pizza, queso, maybe some wine, because they get washed so much. Like my hand stitching was just not holding up when I was hand stitching the bindings down. Like the thread would snap and maybe it was bad thread or maybe it was the washing or what. Maybe I'm bad at hand stitching binding down. I'm not above thinking that's it too. And I would like make king size quilts for my parents and hand stitch the binding down all the way. And my mom would be like, could you fix it when you come visit? Because it came loose. And I'm just like mortified,
Really?
like, oh no. And because I don't want people to think like they broke the quilt I gave them, I'm like, I'll just machine stitch it down because I know that will stick.
I have not gotten to a point where I can machine bind where I really totally love it. I mean, I do it definitely for any baby quilt that I make, but
Mm.
I just have to, I don't know, because I do the whole stitch it on the back, pull it around to the front, but and it looks nice on the front, but then when you flip it over, there's like a line of stitching, like
Use a very heavily patterned backing fabric because that will hide a
that will
multitude of
hide it.
sins. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
sometimes I just don't care. It's like, well, whatever. Babies don't care. That
Oh
baby's
yeah,
gonna judge me.
that's
Come
how
at
I'm
me,
like.
baby. I can
Yeah,
take you.
I'm definitely of that mindset with the baby quilts. I'm like, they
Oh
don't
yeah.
care. Who cares? But for
Yeah.
anything bigger or stuff that I do, I still like finish it by hand because it just looks the best. But I want to, but sometimes you want to get done with something and you got to move
Yeah.
on. And the hand binding can take, like 10 hours for me at least, because it's a big
Yeah.
quilt. Like,
The
you know,
problem that I run too, if I am having a large quilt that I'm hand binding, inevitably at least one or three animals is going to crawl inside of it as I'm stitching it. And I don't want to give people a quilt covered in cat hair because they may be allergic and also it's rude because it looks used.
yeah.
And I tend to wash my quilts before I give them to people just
Mm-hmm.
because I use 80/20 cotton batting
Mm-hmm.
or cotton poly batting and it tends to shrink up. And I've had the experience where I've given someone a quilt that I hadn't washed. And then I was like, I totally throw it in washer dryer. I give them a little like sheet of like care tips if they've never had a quilt
Mm-hmm.
before. Um, and I've gotten like frantic emails or texts like, the quilt is like really wrinkled and I think I broke it. And I'm like, it's fine. It's supposed to look like that. But it doesn't look like when you gave it to me. And so that
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I inevitably will, because of pets, even though I do my best to keep cats off of stuff when I'm making it, like there's just cat hair in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I always wash the quilts before I give them away, either, to DFACs or to friends or to, friends with
Mm-hmm.
babies and stuff, knowing that. And I'm like, please wash it yourself too, because you
Mm-hmm.
might like a different detergent, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, hand binding, someone's going to think it's a fun spelunking activity and like go quilt diving when I'm trying to stitch it.
I don't really mind it, except for if I'm doing this on king quilts, but
Oh yeah.
the
And
king
there's
quilts,
17 corners.
but the king quilts I've done were commissions, so
Ah,
they specified hand binding, so that's
yeah.
why I'm like, when I'm in the middle of those is when I think about I really need to perfect machine binding.
There are people and quilters that like only you just pay them to do the binding.
Yeah.
There's one woman I know that lives in Minnesota and her business is just called the Binding Fairy. All she does is
Wow.
bind quilts for people.
Wow. You have to really like that. I can't imagine
Yeah,
just wanting to do
she
just
is
the
into
binding
it.
part.
And I'm like, I like it because
Wow.
it means I'm done with it when I'm done with that part.
I don't, actually, I like binding. I do like that part of the process. The part I hate the most is the basting. So
Yeah, that's the worst.
that's the
Are you
worst for me.
are you pin basting or spray basting or
It depends.
yeah.
I do pin baste a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my go-to.
yeah. I only spray baste, I think, smaller quilts.
Yeah, same. I use
Mhm.
my spray basting for like postcards and then like
Mhm.
24-inch or less wall hangings. Because
Yeah,
I'm
because
not going to spray at my house, but I'm
yeah,
also not going to take a quilt top
I have to have like
outside
the
where it's
card,
real
like
gross.
I'll put that
Yes.
cardboard wall around what I'm
Yeah.
spraying, or like you said, outside. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've gotten pretty good at pin basting. So, and that really clever quick tool, where you can
Yes, the quick clip thing. I have
quick
that
clip.
too.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
You can go pretty fast with that thing. So,
Yeah. Now, are you laying yours out like on a floor or do you have it
no
set up on a table? Yeah.
table. I did
Okay.
I did one on the floor, and I was like,
I might
this
be
is
too
for
old for
the
that now
this is
because
for the
I've done it.
birds. I can't.
I find myself getting a really strong core workout because I so don't want to like move my knees because I've
Yeah,
kneeled on a
it's like
safety
an
pin
extended game
before.
of Twister,
It's
and you're like all like contorted and sore, and
Yeah. And I'm like, so many parts of me are droopier than I thought. When I'm like, oh, this is not flattering. And my husband comes in and I'm like butt up, like stretched with safety pins, cursing because
Twister.
I poked myself. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm
Right.
like, "It's in your quilt."
Yeah,
So
no, I do it on
inevitably,
my work table for sure. I mean,
yeah, I have like 3 of them. Like I'll get a pile up of
Mhm.
quilt tops where I'm like, I'll space 3 quilts at a time. And by the third one, I am just so over it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this one demonstration of like how you're supposed to base the quilt, and I mean,
Like
she
hand width apart. And I'm like, I ain't got time for
she
that.
took the tape, and you have to tape down so, and you've taut. It's got to be taut and perfect. You know, the background fabric, and then you're layering this, and then I mean, it just took forever. First of all, and her sample was small,
Yeah.
and it still
Like
took
if it's
forever.
going in a show and I'm hoping to win like $10,000 in prize money, sure.
Yeah,
If it's for something that's going to get peed on,
yeah.
no.
Right. I mean, I understand that it's, I guess it's to eliminate like any, you know, pleating or folds or getting, you
Yes.
know, tucked in. But
Yeah.
honestly, knock on wood, I haven't had a ton of issues with that, with just
I
simple pin basting
did
on the
early
table.
on. Yeah, but nowadays it's rare. It'll only be like at the very edge of the quilt, and it's
Right.
because like the
Yeah.
fabric got folded,
Mm-hmm.
like legitimately folded, not just pleated. I'm
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
dang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. We're cool on that.
Oh, were we gonna rumble if we didn't agree? Did I miss that?
No,
Okay.
no. But I don't know. I do never know. People just do things so differently,
Yeah.
and I'm fine. I don't care how anybody does anything. I'm
Yeah.
not
Do
like
what works for
I'm not the
you.
quilt police. So, and
I am not showing up to your house and judging you for how you quilt. Like, all right, if it makes you
exactly.
happy, please do it.
Yeah. In fact, I'm so curious to see how people do things. I mean, because sometimes now here and there I'll pick up something cool
Yeah.
and go with it. So, yeah, I don't just stick to like the one little thing.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you though, the very first time I heard of frankenbatting was from you on your podcast, and it was so cool. And I didn't know that you could do that with your batting scraps,
Yeah.
and I did it. Like I was like, I'm doing
Oh,
this. I'm
yeah.
putting it together and doing the zigzag, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. I do it with the cotton and the collie cotton blends. I tried it once with like just wool batting. That did not go well because then it just like
It's
mashed down and
fluffy.
made this weird like scar in the middle of
Oh,
it. Like that was not good. But it works really well for like cotton or cotton
uh,
blend battings. But yeah, you
mm-hmm,
just like butt them up together and you do the widest zigzag you can.
mm-hmm.
And they sell like fancy tape
I
that's
know.
fusible. But I'm like, I don't want extra chemicals in there if I don't need it, or extra glue because you never know.
Or an
Like,
extra
oh, and
step.
yeah, well, in 15 years, is that going to age badly? And now it
Oh,
crackles or
do you mean
something.
like you just put the tape on there and don't stitch it? It's just held
It's like
together by
this
the tape?
fusible tape.
Oh,
It's like fabric
yeah.
backed fusible tape, but it's a glue product.
Uh,
And then you could run into like if you're a real chemical engineering nerd, then you're like, ooh, well, what is the melting point of that compared to the batting? And yeah, anyway, so stuff can go sideways. So I'm like,
oh, man. Yeah.
thread is meant to go in quilt, so I will just use thread.
Yeah. And it's so easy.
Yeah, and I have like frankenbatted some pieces. Like sometimes it's just 2 big pieces that got
Hmm.
cut off
Hmm.
because I tend to buy like the big roll of batting
Yeah.
and then just have some lop off ends that get stitched together.
Uh-huh.
But I there are some points where I just like open up the drawer where I keep the batting scraps and I'm like, not today, Satan, and I like clean out the whole thing. And now I've stitched together like 2-inch, 2 by 3 inch squares to like 3 by 4 inch squares, and then it's just like this crazy looking like, oh, this I maybe
Oh,
should have thrown these
wow.
scraps away. Like I'm not as bad at that anymore to save that smaller thing because now I'm like,
Yeah.
well, if it'll fit a postcard, all right, I'll leave it that size and chuck it in the postcard bin. But everything else is typically like long strips
Yeah.
that are like 4 inches or more, and then like by
Well,
70 inches.
right,
And I'm
right.
like,
Yeah.
and I've done some where I've like trimmed them down to do like the jelly roll rugs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, frankenbatting, man, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really cool, and it feels good to like not like have all that waste, and you're just like, what do I do with this like, 9 by 59 piece of batting? It just
Yeah,
seems like too much. I mean, I could definitely part with like a 2-inch square piece of batting, or even like a
yeah,
7-inch
I've gotten
square.
over myself. I got over myself.
But those other pieces, so I think it's really cool that I learned that from you and your podcast, and have been able to salvage my batting scraps.
Yeah.
Do you prefer like a cotton poly blend batting, or what is your go-to batting?
I do. I find like 100% cotton batting, to me, it's a little too weighty. I like a little bit of loft to it.
Yeah.
And I can get that with the 80/20 blend. I've done 50/50 blend. I haven't really seen much of a difference between that and the
Okay.
80/20.
Yeah.
Um, I
Do you
find the
do one? Oh, sorry.
I find the Pellon brand like
Uh,
is nice and fluffy. It
yeah.
feels more like a poly,
Oh,
but it's still got the cotton in it. But I
right.
also like the Warm and Natural brand too. And, you know,
Mm.
just I like whatever's on sale, like honestly,
Right.
because I'm buying a big honking roll of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I mean, that's like a couple $100
I
that's going to last me
know.
a couple months. And I'm like, don't go too crazy, but like also, it's not some Bobo brand. You know, it's a company I've heard of before, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you just do the one layer, or do you double them up, or?
I've done some more I've doubled up, but if I do, it's like the 80/20 blend on the bottom and like a wool or a poly on top. So I get some loft and I can do like a trapunto kind
Hmm.
of
And
technique.
then it doesn't get like super heavy too.
Yeah. And honestly, that is like, oh, it's for a show quilt. It's not like a bed quilt. I don't know that I've ever double batted like a bed or a living.
Long armors seem to like to do that because on a commissioned quilt that I made, it was a king size, and that was the first time I've ever heard of doubling up batting.
Well, now if you're a long
And
arm and you
they
don't
were
have to haul
like, they
around.
were like, you have to double layer this, and it's like, you do want to do it with the 80/20, or so we did 80/20 with the one layer of cotton. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it, but
I think it's mechanically a lot easier to do it on. When I think of me trying to haul a double batted king size quilt through a Sweet 16,
hmm.
my arms are going to fall off. Like I'm going to be so hunched up and like I can't,
Right.
can't.
Well, and then it, the real truth revealed itself of like this long armor, he wants the stitching to show up. So that's why they like to double bat
Yeah.
it and have like that poly cotton
Hmm.
layer to
Yeah.
get
Cause you get
that.
that lofty bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the quilting does look nice with it, but I wasn't sure I loved the weight of
It's
that
an
king size.
investment in gravity.
Right.
Yes.
Oh man.
I mean, I say that knowing I sleep under three quilts, like
Hmm.
because there's no double batting. It's just three quilts.
Right.
There's like the king
Yeah.
size quilt that we share, and then my husband has another quilt that he puts on top of that, and then on my side I have another quilt, and then I have the the fuzzy blanket with the kittens printed on it and the basket that my dad got me when I was 10. And like this thing is it's probably never going to disintegrate
Uh-huh.
because it's strictly polyester and
Right.
like from Kmart or something. Just
Yeah.
like yeah, but I just had to wash it today because this one threw up on it last night at like
Aw.
3 a.m. So I'm like, well, thank you. But like one day, I bet I will have to get rid of it and I will be very sad.
Yeah.
And then I will just have three quilts instead of two quilts and a blanket on one side of the bed.
My dog loves the fleece, the soft fleece, and
Like the
the
Mickey,
faux
yeah.
Sherpa. He loves the
Yes.
faux Sherpa.
Oh, yeah.
I know. It's just funny. So I do have that on top of the bed too, because he just loves it. He won't even.
Yeah.
He has this chair in our living room that's just his chair. So if somebody sits in there, he'll go up to you and like stare at you, like, "What are you doing in my chair?"
Yeah.
But if his Sherpa blanket's not in there, he'll kind of like sit there and look at us, like, "Hello."
I did not sign up for this.
God forbid he lay on the floor like a real dog.
Oh, heck no. Yeah. Like, when it's like, oh, let's tidy up the living room. And, because it turned into a blanket swamp over like the holiday break of like just 8 quilts spread out on couches, chairs, floors. And I was like, oh, tidy up. So I like, folded stuff, I'll roll it up and stick it in the basket so it looks pretty. And then there's like, it's just the couch with 2 pillows on it. And Fred got up on it. And he just looked very sad, like, behold the desert that I must sleep on.
Yes.
Like, calm down.
Woe is me. Oh, pets are the best. I love them. Well, Pam, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But I am sad that you are stopping your podcast, but I totally understand it just because, it's I understand what goes into it. And I don't know, I just feel like you've done it for so long and you're allowed.
Yeah.
You're allowed to walk away.
I mean, kind of like when you think of changing your day job and it's like, oh, it is a career change of a sort of like, oh, well, look at me just being a hobbyist now.
Yeah. Start to enjoy
having to buy
things
my
again.
fabric full price like everyone else instead of having industry connections.
You're going to be a muggle again now.
I know.
But you're going to, it sounds like you're already enjoying it. So it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And, well, you're still out there on Instagram and stuff. So we can still kind of like chime in and say hello.
Back on your podcast if you have me and talk about something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll have you on anytime. That's so cool. So much fun. I have a feeling we would always have something to talk about because we haven't stopped yet. So. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you again for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yay. If you would like a bonus episode every month, become a patron and support the Make and Decorate podcast show at my Patreon page, Make and Decorate. The Make and Decorate podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by yours truly, Stephanie Socha. Visit my podcast page at makeanddecorate.com. Become a patron and support the Make and Decorate podcast show at my Patreon page, Make and Decorate.